Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and it's been a surprisingly busy year for airplane-centric war movies featuring actor Glenn Powell. Devotion just hit theaters, and we'll be able to kind of ride the cultural Top Gun wave, or will come crashing down to earth. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So like I said, Devotion obviously is going to bring, if you saw the trailers for this thing, or even the poster, immediately start kind of bringing fairly or unfairly kind of comparisons to Top Gun Maverick, with a big cultural phenomenon, one of the biggest movies of the last decade, and even the oddity that they both featured actor Glenn Powell kind of taking his second spin behind a cockpit this year, which is just, I find strange. I guess you all have your character type, but despite some of those kind of comparisons, it is very clear from this thing, right from the get-go really, that this is a very different kind of film than Top Gun Maverick. This isn't kind of the crowd-pleasing kind of high spectacle blockbuster with, Tom Cruise and his charisma. It's kind of on the other hand from that, is more of like a serious drama that kind of is more focused on kind of exploring some of the kind of issues of racism and sort of the experiences of this of a black pilot, and kind of what that means in sort of as he's going through these missions and with the crew, and the way that he's sort of navigating some of the cultural prejudices. It's kind of more that than it is sort of aerial dogfights. Although it is a war movie, it does have action, and I don't mean any of that as a criticism. This is a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. We'll kind of get into some of it, but this is more than just sort of like Top Gun light. It's trying to be a very different thing, kind of a more true-to-life story. So the premise of this thing, it's kind of set during America's forgotten war, the Korean War, in the 1950s, and it's inspired by kind of a real true story of Jesse Brown, who, as I was kind of looking into it, kind of the first black aviator that kind of graduated from the U.S. sort of the basic training, and so he's sort of he's the only one among his crew, and it kind of follows as he kind of navigates some of the cultural stuff going on. I'm not a history buff. I don't know how close this film, how close it flies to the accuracy of history in the war. There's a reason they call it the Forgotten War, because people just don't know a whole lot about it. But really, I think, and it does seem like it, from what I have seen, that it does stick fairly close to the actual story of what happened, and they bring in a lot of those elements and kind of the true events. But I think this film isn't necessarily trying to just sort of, almost like the historical context, the war, that's sort of the backdrop for really more of like a character study into the character of Jesse Brown. And I think kind of the intention of this film even is to kind of how that showcases and some of the historical stuff, and how that still kind of manifests kind of in contemporary settings. And like I said, despite being a movie about planes, Devotion never really manages to soar. I think maybe like the highest compliment you can give a movie that's just about a war movie is that it's effective and it's efficient. It's kind of more competent, I guess, than it is excellent. Nothing is bad. There's nothing is like the acting is really good. The cinematography, everything is done well. It just lacks kind of that flair or kind of style of kind of the more like cinematic elements of like a big kind of blockbuster, but everything in here is efficient. It's more kind of straight to the point, just telling this historical story. And one of the strengths of this film is the acting. Jonathan Majors, who plays the character of Jesse Brown, and apparently he's in everything, because he was in like 3 of the trailers, and we walked out of the theater, and he's on like 2 or 3 of the movie posters. He's definitely kind of having his breakout moment this year, it seems, and you can see why. He's a talented actor, and he really is able to communicate, kind of to capture the nuance of Jesse's character, despite the fact that he's not necessarily super kind of vocal or even charismatic, kind of by design of who the character is, and kind of how the culture sort of like pushes him down, but just sort of almost silently, kind of without words, he can communicate kind of with his eyes, just some of kind of the quiet strength that he has, but also just sort of this harbored hurt and resentment that's sort of building up inside of him. And there's one scene in particular where he's sort of looking into a mirror, and he's repeating to himself kind of all these hateful things that he's been told kind of over the years. And he's kind of using that to try and build himself back up in strength, and kind of overcome that. And in that scene, like, the camera focuses almost uncomfortably close to his face, and he's just staring right at you as he's repeating these sort of hateful, derogatory terms and things that it sounds like maybe his father or his instructors or whoever it was. And just moments like that, he completely sells it. You feel it. It's uncomfortable, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable. But this sort of kind of that raw emotion that he has. Glenn Powell, he's also, again, like I said, he's in this movie as well, and he's good. He's a charismatic guy. His character doesn't necessarily have as much, because he's not focused as much. He doesn't have as nuanced of the kind of the characterization. There's more to his character that I think the story could have told, but he definitely kind of serves as a good kind of wingmate encounter in this this relationship, which really serves as the heart of this film. So Wild Devotion is more of like a character study than it is sort of like the fast-paced thriller. It's also a war movie. You do get some scenes of kind of wartime, both in the air and on the ground. And hey, we, even though we've seen it already in Top Gun, there's just something undeniably satisfying about the sight of airplanes flying information across a big movie screen. There's just something kind of some cinematic magic to that. So the aerial combat in this is not quite as I guess cinematic or as like immersive as in Top Gun. It's not like edge of your seat necessarily or just high adrenaline. But it does feel maybe more grounded. It is exciting. These action scenes, there's a couple most of them near the end of the film, and the beginning of the film is kind of preparing for this and training and more of the character stuff. But hey, it is good, and it is exciting to see it on a big screen. So it definitely does deliver some of that, even if the focus is more on like the characters and their relationships. As far as content to consider, kind of things going on the surface of this film, profanity, there is frequent profanities. I didn't catch any like F-bombs in this thing, but there is quite a lot of kind of more minor, words that start with S and A and D. Those are in there quite frequently. Again, I think it fits with the story and the context and wartime, and some of them are even like directed towards Jesse as a black man, and you get there's 3 to 4 uses of the N-word, and there's other kind of derogatory words that are used throughout this. Personally, I found it fitting to the story, but maybe there is quite a bit in there, so just be aware of that. Violence, it's a war movie, but it's most of the war is kind of seen from the perspective of like far up in the air of the combat, so you don't necessarily see like blood or gore or anything. It's more just sort of intense, and obviously characters are dying and planes are crashing and some of that, but not anything like gratuitous in that sense. And sexuality, really not a whole lot of this. In the kind of the pilot's locker room, you see a couple like pin-up posters of some females kind of like wearing like swimsuits and stuff. They're not nude, but they're kind of in the background. And one of the scenes, characters, like, they get, like, their off day in France, and they kind of talk about kind of carousing and kind of trying to pick up women, and they're kind of out there trying to flirt, but you don't see anything inappropriate in that sense. And there's a scene in a casino where some of the women have, like, more, like, real form-fitting or low-cut dresses, but for the most part, not a whole lot for sexuality. Maybe just a couple other things just to be aware of. And there's several kind of moments of like alcohol consumption, characters getting drunk, and then also they go to a casino, so you kind of see gambling and some of that for one of the scenes. But overall, not a whole lot as far as content in this movie. So as far as things like themes and things going on beneath the surface of this film, really the heart of this movie is sort of Jesse Brown's experiences just as a black man and kind of navigating some of that. And the film shows kind of the racism and prejudice sort of through like overt actions, like bartenders that will serve his white pilot wingmates but won't bring his drinks, and just sort of like direct comments from characters that they make to him. But I think maybe even, at least for me, maybe even more powerful than that, you also just sort of see how it impacts him sort of more in like the more subtle and like maybe unseen ways. Like it's emphasized several times throughout this film that Jesse doesn't drink. He doesn't drink alcohol, and sort of the implication for that is that he can't allow himself to kind of get carried away and do any kind of drunken, ill-advised action. Because kind of at one point he's talking to Tom, which is Glenn Powell's character, and kind of says, hey, a slap on my wrist is not the same as yours. He's sort of held to a different standard all throughout the film, and kind of has to hold himself even more above reproach. The film does sort of show different ways that just sort of the way that the characters view him impacts him, whether overtly or more like passive aggressively, I guess. In that sense, there's also a scene where kind of journalists come to the aircraft carrier, and they're gonna like do almost like a puff piece. They're gonna kind of real celebrate his story and what he's accomplished. And it seems like they're, at the start they seem like well-meaning, but it becomes very clear as they go that they're kind of fishing for just a very kind of racially focused feature and article for him, and Jesse doesn't really take the bait. You just kind of see him, hey, he just wants to be appreciated for his skills and his accomplishments, not just for the fact that he did those as a black man. So you kind of do get that perspective, and maybe the last sort of part of that this theme that I found interesting. Is this the way that this film kind of showcases the sort of how those different experiences lead to different perspectives? And you see that most clearly in the relationship with Jesse and then with Tom, despite kind of their mutual trust and kind of being wingmen, and there's a friendship between them. Just that their life experiences cause them to see situations very different. There's a really well executed scene where after one of the missions, and Jesse has sort of disobeyed Tom's direct orders, so Tom has to write up the report, and that leads to Jesse kind of getting reprimanded for insubordination. And they kind of are having sort of an argument about that. And the film shows the messiness of that situation, that you kind of understand both characters. You understand, hey, Tom has to submit an honest report. He's not going to lie about what happened. That is the events of the situation. Where you also you see, and especially even later, it makes even more sense, but why Jesse maybe wouldn't necessarily always, it's not as easy for him to just follow orders, and what seemed very simple to Tom, kind of based on the experiences for Jesse, is just a whole different understanding. And it's not necessarily that the film is saying that either character should do this or not do that, but it just sort of shows kind of the messiness of that, and almost a hopeless sort of helpless disconnect between them, where I think ultimately the film kind of lands on, hey, you're not always going to understand each other, but kind of the best you can do is just sort of be there for each other and kind of be the wingman and kind of be devoted in that sense. So as a Christian, I found that interesting. I watched this movie as maybe the only white person in the theater, and just hearing audience members kind of like vocalizing and kind of interacting with that, just sort of see that it does have kind of a powerful message to share. So in the end, I enjoyed this movie. I don't think this is a standout movie. I don't think this is a movie that people are going to, a real buzzworthy movie that lots of people want to flock to the movie to see. I do think it will get lost in like the Top Gun shuffle, and maybe just held to unrealistic kind of expectations. It's not a feel-good movie, I guess. It ends very bittersweet. I think it's maybe an inspirational one. It has a meaningful story, and I think a story that's worth sort of experiencing and kind of thinking through. But it is sort of the movie that will leave you kind of send you from the theater pondering on it, kind of quietly thinking about it, rather than like pumping your fist and wanting to talk about it with your friends. But hey, I think there's definitely a place for these kind of movies, and I'm glad this movie's here. Curious to see how many people will actually check this thing out in theaters. But hey, if you checked out this movie, let me know what you thought. Jump in the comment section. Share what you thought of this movie, if you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, if you saw some other stuff, kind of, some positive things going on in this movie. Would love to have that conversation with you guys. If you guys haven't done so, I encourage you, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. We've got a lot of other movie reviews and live streams and this other video fun stuff we're doing here. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.